I think we'll get straight into it. I need to unmute Matti, and there you go.
Okay, so sharing my desktop would be the first thing, and then the slide. So I'm Matti Harjula. I have been a developer of Stack since Stack 1, so over 10 years, and I have supported the use of Stack in Finland and especially in Aalto University for most of my professional career. And during that support, I have helped our question authors express themselves and created various types of extensions to Stack so that they can do whatever they want to do. But there were some issues that could not be solved. And in this talk, I will be representing a new question type that has been built on Stack and showing how it can be used to solve certain issues that Stack and most other systems tend to have. At the end of the demonstration, I will be showing how to author actual questions or how to deal with the complexity of authoring this type of question. So first onto the history of Stateful. So things started to become difficult when using Stack in 2012 and trying to do questions for industrial management types of teachers. They wanted to create simulations, the questions where you first ask something and then based on the answer ask something else, and based on that maybe generate some random event and check how the student reacts. Obviously, doing that kind of a thing in Stack or any other stateless system is difficult as you can't change the question on the fly. But one of our best question authors managed to still do it by making a Stack question where there were multiple inputs, and when they gave an answer to the first input, the feedback to that input would then give you the next question. And then you gave an answer to the next input and so on. Obviously, dealing with all that was slightly difficult. So after that, we started to trial with JavaScript and building some kind of a dynamic behavior on the browser side. But it was difficult also, as acting with JavaScript isn't exactly something that belongs to the basic skills of your question authors. And browsers are a moving target, and these materials tended to break down. There were also some security issues related to that, but maybe we'll ignore those. So in around 2015, I managed to come up with an idea of how to extend Stack so that we could do stuff. And as the idea seemed to work, we demonstrated it at EAMS 2016, and everyone was happy, but not me though, because authoring questions with that new concept didn't really work. It became very difficult to author large questions, long questions, as you had branching in the questions, and testing that branching was practically impossible. So we refined that idea further and started to search for funding to implement it. And in 2018, 2 years ago, funding materialized. So if you tag your dream project into a massive collection of projects, someone might actually fund it without noticing that they were funding it. And the Finnish Ministry of Education managed to give me some money to code. And unfortunately, that happened just at the time of EAMS 2018, so I had nothing to show and was heavily coding. But in EAMS 2018, there was a specific keynote by Mohammed Jabara that gave us the terminology to use when talking about stateful. So stateful is all about inner loop adaptation. Adaptation based on the current activity of the student in this question. And if you haven't seen that keynote, I highly recommend watching it. It will teach you much about adaptation in educational materials in all scales. Okay, so last summer we got the prototype done, or the new version, and initial testing began with various types of authors, mainly physics teachers, and they came up with very interesting new use patterns. And then we did more development. And now we are finally at the point where we are exposing students to Stateful or Stateful to students this fall. And after that, we will see if it actually works. So the main point to remember here is that Stack and Stateful are very tightly coupled. So Stateful is basically just Stack with state, like it was all originally advertised. So it uses all the Stack features that we love so much. And as it shares all the internal parts of Stack, we can benefit from the developments of Stack, and Stack can benefit from the developments of Stateful. And this is basically where they overlap. So the key concept in Stack is these potential response trees, and Stateful very much uses that. We also use all the Stack Maxima libraries and all this evaluation and security features related to that. But Stateful will never be able to do deferred feedback, as that kind of a behavior won't work in a question that relies on interactivity. And Stateful will probably be a bit slow in gaining all the newest ideas from Chris, and maybe Stack won't get my newest ideas either. But Stateful will soon bring new performance improvements to Stack. And Stateful will probably get the rest of Stack's inputs soon also. So basic terminology related to Stateful. So Stateful questions are basically just a collection of Stack questions, just parametric questions, like if you were to use computer adaptive testing or similar constructs. But the idea here is that when your question classifies the student's input, it can decide that now we are going to change to the other question in this collection of parametric questions and set the parameters accordingly. It can also store some details into memory and use that to adapt the next time it has to make some kind of a choice. In Stateful, the term for one of those questions is a scene, and the obvious term for analyzing student activity is a path. So which scenes did the student visit and through which transitions they went through the graph of scenes. Here's a graphical representation or style for representing questions, showing two basic patterns for stateful questions. So the most common pattern we have seen in materials authored thus far is the so-called penalty lap. So you have a question here, and depending on how the student answers, if they answer correctly, they go to the next scene, skipping this loop. But if they were to answer incorrectly, we might have a counter that counts how many times they have given this particular incorrect answer or any incorrect answer. If the counter isn't too high, they might just try again. But if it's too high, then they will be sent to a penalty lab where they go through lessons and answer questions related to those, and until they have passed through all those lessons and get back to the question, which they then attempt again. And the state will remember that they have gone through this loop and there's no need to go there anymore. This can also be used as a way of doing intermediate steps. So the logic could be that first you ask the end result, and after that you ask the intermediate steps, so that you don't show the steps or scaffold the answer by showing the slots where the answers to those intermediate steps would need to be placed. Or you could use those intermediate step questions as a part of this penalty lab to help the student to understand what steps they should take. Okay, then there's this horrible graph where we have the option of student choosing from multiple potential solution paths. For example, we might have a physics exercise where they could use energy principles to calculate some kind of a solution, or they might go through kinematics or dynamics or something like that. But if we give the student the choice of selecting the method, then we need to also give them the choice of changing their mind, which causes complications and all these transitions backward. And if we have such transitions, then the student's grading needs to take into account the fact that they might have started some process, done it halfway through, and then gone back and done a separate process on the side. So these are rare, but we have already seen those in exercises. Also, it might be that the student doesn't make the choice. We might analyze the answer, the shape of the answer, how much it has been evaluated, how much it has been simplified, and do the choice for them ourselves. And finally, it doesn't require, these questions do not require that there's a just single end scene. So a path through the question might lead to two different end results, depending on the structure of the question. Okay, then some future plans related to stateful. So for now, stateful only has local state. So the question updates its own state. But obviously, interesting development place would be to connect stateful to learning analytics. So that if we already know that a student knows how to differentiate something, we might skip the steps in a question where you do differentiation and instead add some steps that do something more interesting for that particular student. But handling such state is kind of difficult and we are not there yet. Also, analyzing massive amounts of students is a difficult task, and for that we need to be able to visualize how these groups of students divide up into various paths, and current aim is to build Sankey diagrams. Sankey diagrams were originally built to track the energy flows in a steam engine, and as we are now doing physics exercises with physics teachers that are trying to do thermodynamics papers, so we feel that it's natural to use the same terminology for them. Okay, now on to this year's sample question. I'll simply show the state graph here before we go to the demo. So in 2016, we had this integration by parts question where you could integrate to the wrong direction infinitely. And the question gave increasingly snarky feedback about going to the wrong direction until the student guessed that they have to change their strategy and go to the correct direction. Now the question doesn't have a loop. It has two penalty laps related to possible types of errors. And in this type of a question, you need to be very careful reading it. So we are asking the areas shaded and not the actual definite integral of that polynomial. So you have to integrate the absolute value. If they miss that little detail, you will get very specific feedback about it. On the other hand, if they give something completely different, they will be taught to integrate a polynomial, or they will be asked to integrate a polynomial. And this is the whole question in terms of stateful concepts. So we have a scene where we start and a scene where we end. We have a scene where we check that you can integrate the polynomial, and a scene where we check that they know where the signs change. Then we have state variables that keep track of the types of transitions they have made or types of errors they have made. For example, if they did make this error, we specifically remember that. And then we have transitions that have specific rules. So if they give the correct answer, then we give them some points, depending on how many errors they made. And if they make a particular type of error, we will go to the penalty lab if they haven't been there already. Okay, so now to the demo. You all have the permission to go to the demo site, and you all have editing rights there. So if you want to try making this yourself or breaking these questions, feel free. They should remain active for you for a couple of months, maybe not to the end of the year like some other services, but still it's pretty much the only place where you can test this. Okay, and then to the actual question. Oh, those probably are. So yes, the question that probably someone has tried. So this is a JSF graph for those that didn't already see the demonstration. And if I give it something stupid, it should validate it, and I should end up in a scene where I have to integrate that. But why would I test it by typing in these details? That's kind of difficult to do if you have a long question that happens to branch a lot. For that reason, Stateful provides specific tools for defining what to fill into these fields. So in basic Moodle questions, you have this fill in correct responses, which is a nice way of testing your material. But if you have a question that has multiple possible sensible inputs or multiple inputs that cause specific feedback or errors, testing them is slow. Therefore, Stateful provides a list of certain test inputs and checks if they actually do what they should do, and if they can do anything in this specific state. And you can simply fill in that input and check what happens. After that, it will then shift to that scene and give you the new set of inputs that are possible. In this case, they ask me, or the question asks for the points where the sign changes. There are plenty of hints. The question is obviously difficult, not pedagogically sensible, but technically interesting. And to give 3 routes, we would probably need 3 spots. And as I don't want to calculate them myself, I just click that and get them. Now we would then return back to the start scene, where we see that, yes, let's try it again. And these are the details that we already figured. Now calculate the correct one. And filling in the answer is relatively easy, and then you are through the question. Fine. But what's the interesting bit when doing these kind of questions is the complexity of the authoring process. So if we were to change that question in such a way that in some particular state it gives some kind of a feedback, how would we quickly test that that feedback gets outputted in those scenes that we care about? So we have a stateful editor, and obviously no one writes that code. So we are using a specific editor from somewhere else where that is built for stateful. In it, we can access the logical questions, or the stack questions that make up this question, where we have basic rules for generating the polynomial, and at some point some graphing rules, and at the end these state variables that have been initialized as false. And then it has a scene, this question, that has a specific conditional rendering that says that if you have been in any of these error states, let's put this, now let's try it again, comment there. And if you have been in particular scenes, then we draw this. You have already found out this kind of things, details. But what I want to do is I want to put into the end scene a comment about the engineer's method of solving this kind of a problem. And I already made the text, and let's see if we can get it working. So I'm guessing that most people would use this method. Just pick large enough b. You don't have to do absolute values. Now let's save it and see what happens in the preview. We go with the correct answer, we don't see anything. Okay, now the option would be to simply try all the possible combinations and see what happens. No one has the time for that. Therefore, we have tools that can simulate all the possible input actions and sequences up to specific depth for multiple variants and so on. So we are interested in the end scene, and in particular the cases where we have the sign error. So does that have the comment? Yes, it has. And that shouldn't have the comment. Yeah, good. So making the system automate all these testing steps is important for those that want to answer these questions in any larger scale. So if you are a super coder, you can probably just simulate all of these things in your head, but it is not realistic to expect that from any real question authors. And that was the reason why Stack with State died and Stateful was created. It has more sensible question structure, question model that can actually do these kinds of things. And you can use this tool to check what it would look, or what the plot would look in various different variants. Okay, but I'm guessing that's about it for that part of the demo. And thank you for your time. And if you want to know about Stateful, please contact me. If that editor looked nice to you, please contact my commercial alter ego that builds editors for Stack and Stateful and so on. And now I hope that Christian will handle the questions.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Matti, for that talk. That was really interesting. Since your talk in 2016, I've implemented a similar feature in Numbers, so I'll get a copy off you again. We have a couple of questions on the Moodle site. First of all, Ingo Dan says, is there a documented interface between Stateful and Stack that would allow for using Stateful with another test system? So I guess, could you just clarify what the relationship is between Stateful and Stack?
So Stateful is a complete new question type that just requires Stack. So it's a Moodle question type like Stack. So if you have a Moodle, you can just use Stateful, but they don't really connect directly, or Stack or Stateful don't really connect directly to each other. And as you see in the EAMS site, you can just use LTI to push your Stateful questions to any system you want.
Yeah, so Moodle can expose courses through an LTI connection, and that's how you would use it with any other virtual learning environment.
Yeah, at this point, but obviously it has been built in such a way that it could be ported into some other platform. And there are APIs actually in the Stateful so that it could be used in a server mode somewhere.
Actually, now thinking this is probably a question about, can you use this with Ilias? Is that right?
Well, not yet. I guess that Ilias could do it, but I don't know that much about Ilias at some point.
Okay, we have one more question from Martin Kraska, who says, is the dynamic matrix input available in Stack? I think you showed a matrix that you could change the size of.
Unfortunately, not yet. So Stateful is a proving ground for many new features for Stack, and that input type is in the new input 2 system that is not going to be in Stack very soon. It will probably take a year or two to get it into Stack. but there are actual dynamic matrix fields in Stack, or coming very soon from other people. Yeah.
Okay. Right, thank you. I don't think we have any more questions now, unless anybody wants to peep up now. No? Okay, well, so thank you again.